Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Larry Kudlow, CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend, joins me as my colleague and co-host. Larry's traveling, is in Washington, and we're catching him right now on his mobile phone. We'll speak to him in just a moment. And I also welcome Jennifer Rubin, who writes Right Turn for the Washington Post. It is serendipity that the Washington Post correspondent, Jennifer Rubin, joins us this evening because in the Washington Post, in these last hours, is an extremely laudatory piece about Larry Kudlow, mentioning on his radio show some 96 hours ago that because he's a resident in Connecticut, he is looking at Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blumenthal's hesitation, non-commitment at this point about the Iran deal. And Larry's examining the possibility of running for Senate. Kudlow for Senate from the state of Connecticut. Larry, a very good evening to you. The article in the Washington Post is extremely positive, and I am pleased, and I am also puzzled. Did you expect this, Larry, from your radio show to the Washington Post's headlines? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John and Jennifer. I guess the short answer is no. I figured, on the radio I might make some waves, but the story has become much, much, much greater, and the Post story was a good story. I appreciate that. There are lots of other ones out there. Look, I just be real simple about this. To me, this is a gigantic issue, this Iranian agreement, a gigantic issue which must be defeated. And there are many complexities to it, but I'm boiling it down in the following way, John, as an economist, I guess. We're talking about giving Iran $150 billion in cash, more or less. And they're going to use that cash at the end of the sanctions to kill Americans, to kill Israelis, to kill our allies, to promote terrorism. That's what they're going to do. And they're going to come at us, and they've already begun. And it is incredible to me that Senator Blumenthal and many other Democrats on the fence don't understand the significance of this, the historical significance of this. So I'm basically calling for a citizens movement. I think people should get up in arms all over the country and challenge any Democratic senators who vote in favor of this agreement. And as far as I'm concerned in Connecticut, I haven't made a final decision, but I'm looking very, very closely in the race and making certain preparations for this race. I don't know how Blumenthal is going to vote, but if he votes in favor of this deal, John, I'm up in arms.
My information, Larry, and I've told you this before, is that Richard Blumenthal will support the president, will support the Vienna Accord, and this delay, he's the only member of the Connecticut delegation who has not announced support for the deal. This delay is partisanship, game playing. We welcome Jennifer Rubin. Jennifer, I'm eager for your remarks about this surprise in the Washington Post praising Larry Kudlow as a man of conscience in Connecticut. Good evening to you, Jennifer.
It's just fine. Well, the Washington Post got it right. He is a man of conscience, and he is in Connecticut. This is not even a close call. And for a group of senators who always pose as great friends of Israel, is very worried about the Iranian threat, for them to accept this kind of deal is just the worst level of partisan hackery I have seen in all my years doing this. This is not an issue in which I think reasonable minds differ. There's one and only one reason why these Democrats are falling into line, and that is because the left wing of the Democratic Party is vociferously anti-Israel and anti-defense in general, and they see everything as a win or a loss for this president and those Republicans, and they are not able to remove themselves, as Larry says, on an issue of such historic consequence to do the right thing. And I would encourage Larry, I would encourage anyone in the state of Pennsylvania where Robert Casey Jr., another man who fancies himself as a great friend of Israel, has also announced that he's going to support the deal. So I say the more the merrier.
I want to draw, Larry, I want to draw you out on this because you're not just about the Iran deal. You have other things to say about Connecticut, but the Iran deal is the driver for your decision. Is that correct, Larry?
It really is. It's funny, I was talking about this on air with our friend Peter Roscom, distinguished congressman from outside Chicago. He's the leading whip. He's the leader in the House vote to disagree on the Iranian question. And we were talking about it, and I just started going on. And I asked him about some of the key members in the Senate, what he could tell me. And I asked him about Blumenthal, and he said he thinks Blumenthal is leaning to support the president. And I just blew up at that. I cannot. I mean, Jen put it right. I mean, this is an enormous historical moment, and we're talking about national security and defense. John, I can sit down with you and a handful of others and fix this economy in 30 minutes, okay?
Right.
We know how to do that. We know how to do that, okay? We can slash corporate taxes and deregulate and whatnot. But when you're talking about national security and foreign policy, decisions made take a long time to get unwound. I mean, I learned that from Reagan, for heaven's sakes, and we watched Democrats and Republicans for 50, 60, 70 years fight the Cold War against communism. What I'm saying is Obama would give Iran, and hence terrorism and anti-Israelism and anti-Americanism, Obama is giving them a tremendous leg up. And I think Jen has a point. I hate to say it, because this should be a matter of conscience. But I think her point about partisan hacks is part of this equation. I don't want to get personal with Dick Blumenthal. I've known him a long time. When I was a Democrat, we both worked for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, so I don't want to get personal. But to me, the only reason you could possibly vote for this thing is just out of partisanship, out of party line. And gosh, this country has got to be greater than that if we expect to regain our leadership.
Jennifer, do the Democrats believe that they will pay no price for supporting the president despite the logic of the Iranian predator state? Does Blumenthal think there's no risk here in going along with the Vienna Accord?
I suppose so. I guess their biggest fear is that they would be primaried from the left, and they figure years will pass, everything will work out, people will forget, people have long memories, and they'll, slide by. But it's interesting what Larry just said. This afternoon, I had the pleasure of interviewing former Vice President Dick Cheney, who was out with a marvelous book that I would recommend to all of your listeners. The title of it is Exceptional, why the world needs a strong America. And he made exactly the same point that Larry just did, that for decades, really going back to the years leading up to World War II, when FDR agreed to Lend-Lease and kept the British afloat quite literally until we entered the war. Up through Barack Obama, there was a bipartisan tradition in which American leadership, American defense of our friends, American defense of the free world took priority. And that was true when Truman was president, when FDR was president, going all the way up through, frankly, even through Bill Clinton. If you remember, he took action in Kosovo. Until we got to this president, and he simply does not believe America can move events or should move events in our favor. He thinks that he can sweet talk and engage our worst enemies. He thinks he's going to transform that region. This is nonsense. And, for the Democratic Party to follow him over the cliff is ludicrous. I think it's political suicide for them. I think they will pay a price. I think people have long memories, longer than they think. And you know what? The White House told them, you're not going to pay any price for Obamacare. They lost the House, and then they lost the Senate. And I hasten to say that I think that this will cost them the opportunity to take back the Senate and potentially the White House, because Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or whoever they scrape up, out of the old folks' home to run on the Democratic side is going to have to defend this loser.
We're speaking with Jennifer Rubin.
Just add to that, which is always beautifully put by Jennifer. But look, I am astonished, John, that the Republican candidates for president are not making the case that we are making tonight. This is the issue of the moment. They're going to vote, as you noted the other night at our house, they're going to vote on cloture, and they need 60 votes. And then if they can get that, they're going to vote against the bill, and then Obama will veto it, and they're going to try to overturn the veto. The Republican candidates should be talking about this day and night for the protection of Americans and the protection of our allies, and to win back the respect of our own allies, and, of course, to defend freedom around the world. These are traditional values. I'm writing a book about John F. Kennedy and his tax cuts, but you look at Kennedy's foreign policy, It fits right into what Dick Cheney is saying or what Jennifer Rubin is saying. And you can go back to Harry Truman, another Democrat. It fits right in. My friend Joe Lieberman, the former senator of Connecticut, talks about this all the time. And you're right. Even Bill Clinton, I say even Bill Clinton, whose wife is running. I mean, Clinton sort of understood the importance of this issue, but he never had a pivotal vote like this because he never tried to pull anything off like this. So we're breaking American tradition, and we are compromising American security, which is the security of everybody, all right? On the coast, on the inland, what they're doing, airplanes, railroads, bus stations, people have got to understand that giving Iran $150 billion is a death wish. It's a death wish. And where is Jeb Bush on this? Where is Donald Trump on this? Where is Scott Walker on this? Instead of bickering amongst themselves about one thing or another, this is a unifying issue of national security. I just don't understand it. So anyway, my call is to citizens, amateurs, people who have never done this before. Get out there. March. Vote.
We'll speak of the Republicans when we come back, and especially three unusual leaders in the Iowa poll, most recently, three non-politicians, Donald Trump, of course, Dr. Ben Carson, and Carly Fiorina, all leading the pack. The politicians. Larry Kudlow looking at a run for the Connecticut Senate. Larry Kudlow in the school of Joe Lieberman from the state of Connecticut, and Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post. I'm John Batchelor.